How should one prepare when the weather forecast calls for the season's first freeze?
If you own a home, there are several things to do to prepare for the onset of winter. Make sure that your furnace is in good working order and that you have clean air filters. If you have a chimney and a wood-burning fireplace, have a professional chimney sweep clear it of inflammable creosote. A fire hazard responsible for many house fires annually in the United States. Also, check the chimney outside for any birds' nests, which are also a potential fire hazard. Outside. In the yard, drain garden hoses and check the sprinklers to make sure they are clear. Frozen hoses and sprinkler systems can cause pipes to burst.
What is a photochemical grid model?
A photochemical grid model is a computer model used by meteorologists and environmental scientists to simulate what might happen during air pollution episodes under various weather conditions. A grid system is employed in which the area of study, for instance, a city, is cut up into thousands of cells, each usually a couple miles or kilometers wide and long. The cells also have a third dimension, height, varying in depth according to the altitude that scientists wish to study. These models simulate vertical and horizontal air movements, increases in various gases and particles from sources ranging from buildings and cars to plants and animals, and chemical reactions occurring in the atmosphere. They are very useful in predicting effects on ozone levels. A photochemical grid model is thus not the same as a meteorological model, but it does use this meteorological tool to study how pollution increases, dissipates, and affects certain areas. Photochemical grid models can be used to simulate how making different decisions affecting pollutant outputs would affect air quality. For example, if city officials decided to limit commuter traffic into the downtown area by 10%, they could simulate how levels of carbon monoxide would be reduced.
How many people died as a result of the subsequent failure of the levees and flooding after Hurricane Katrina struck?
The accepted final figures state that 836 people lost their lives following the landfall of Hurricane Katrina.
How is snowfall measured?
Snowfall is measured in a very practical and low-tech way, with a ruler. To get a good average indication of snowfall in a selected area, the National Weather Service takes measurements from several locations, instead of just one, and then averages them out. In places where there is often heavy amounts of snow, tall poles are erected that can measure the white stuff when it accumulates up to several feet, or even meters, deep. Snowfall can also be measured using a heated rain gauge, which melts the snow into water. Then converts it back to estimated snow levels by using the formula that 1 inch of rainwater roughly equals 10 inches of snow. However, in North America, this method is not really used because it is not very accurate. There is also the snow pillow method for measuring snow, which uses a scale to measure the weight of the snowfall. In snowier climates, a tool called a snowboard, which is not the same as the snowboards used for wintertime fun, is used. A snowboard is a 2-foot wide by 2-foot high piece of plywood that is painted white and put in a location where snow is not likely to drift. The purpose of the white paint is to minimize the melting effects of solar radiation. Snow depth measurements are then taken with a ruler every 6 hours. The 6-hour rule is hard and fast. This was made clear in 1997, when an observer for the National Weather Service recorded a snowfall of 77 inches, 196 centimeters, in Montague, New York, within a 24-hour period. This would have been a world record, but it was disallowed when investigators learned that the observer recorded measurements every 4 hours instead of every 6.
What is the Umkehr effect?
Swiss astronomer Paul Gotz published a paper in 1931 in which he described how ultraviolet light is affected by the ozone layer. Ozone absorbs different wavelengths of light in the ultraviolet range at varying amounts, and these amounts change depending on the angle of the sun in the sky. Umkehr is German for change or convert. Measuring the difference between the amount of light being received at the two wavelengths can tell scientists how much ozone is in the atmosphere.
What is a sunspot?
Sunspots, when viewed by visible light, appear as dark blemishes on the sun. Most sunspots have two physical components, the umbra, which is a smaller, dark, featureless core, and the penumbra, which is a large, lighter surrounding region. Within the penumbra are delicate-looking filaments that extend outward like spokes on a bicycle wheel. Sunspots vary in size and tend to be clustered in groups. Many of them far exceed the size of our planet and could easily swallow Earth whole. Sunspots are the sites of incredibly powerful, magnetically driven phenomena. Even though they look calm and quiet in visible light. Pictures of sunspots taken in ultraviolet light and in X-rays clearly show the tremendous energy they produce and release, as well as the powerful magnetic fields that permeate and surround them.
What is a fumarole?
Volcanic gases escape from fumaroles, or vents, around volcanically active areas. They can occur along tiny cracks or long fissures in a volcano, in groups called clusters or fields, and on the surfaces of lava and pyroclastic flows. Fumaroles have been known to last for centuries. They can also disappear in a few weeks or months if their source cools quickly. For example, Yellowstone National Park and the Kilauea volcanoes have many fumaroles and associated deposits. Some have been there for years, while others have just recently appeared.
How much water is in the world's oceans?
Earth is about 70% covered by oceans and seas. And about 97% of the world's total water is contained in the oceans. 2% of this water is in the form of ice.
What are sun dogs and moon dogs?
When ice crystals are present in the air, the light from the sun or moon can be reflected, causing bright spots to appear on either side of these heavenly bodies. Sundogs, also called mock suns or parhelions, are sometimes so bright that they look like two companion suns appearing at angles of about 22 degrees on either side of the sun.
Why is infrared light from the sun important?
Infrared light from the sun provides about 50% of the solar energy that reaches Earth in the form of heat. Without it, our planet would be a much colder place. The rest of the heat energy comes from light in the visible spectrum range that, after it is absorbed, radiates back into the atmosphere in the form of heat.
Is there a classification system for snowflakes?
Humankind has an affinity for classifying just about anything, and that includes snowflakes. In 1951, the International Commission on Snow and Ice, yes, there was such a commission, created a system for putting a name on each type of snowflake. A daunting task when one considers that no two flakes are alike.
When adding antifreeze to a car, should you gauge the amount based on expected low temperatures or expected low wind chills?
After referring to your car's owner's manual, add the appropriate amount of antifreeze. To protect your radiator at the lowest expected air temperatures for your region, you can research the internet sites such as www.weather.com. Are helpful to find what the expected low is for your area. This generally works for urban areas. But if you live in a rural area, you might wish to subtract an additional 20 degrees Fahrenheit 9.5 degrees Celsius to be safe.
What is an isobar?
An isobar is a line indicating on a weather map the point where the air pressure is the same, i.e., lines of equal pressure. Isobars are a convenient way to locate cold and warm fronts on a map and regions of high and low pressure.
What are the different scales of atmospheric motion?
Meteorologists divide weather patterns and motions based on actions that are occurring at various scales of size. Just as economists have macroeconomics, how the economy functions on a regional, national, or international level, and microeconomics, financial concepts apply to a single household or business. Meteorologists find it convenient to divide weather phenomena this way, too. Below is an explanation of the divisions. The macro scale, or synoptic scale, refers to weather processes affecting large areas, such as pressure systems, fronts, and the jet stream. The microscale concerns highly localized events, such as a tornado, a fog bank, or a small rain shower that affects an area of only a few hundred square feet or meters. The mesoscale deals with weather events somewhere between the micro and macro levels, usually ranging over several miles to 100 miles or so. Thunderstorms, cloud systems, and breeze fronts are some examples of weather falling into this category. The mesoscale is sometimes divided even further into one, mesogamma, covering about 1 to 12 miles 2 to 20 kilometers, 2, mesobeta, 25 to 125 miles 20 to 200 kilometers. And 3, meso-alpha, 125 to 1250 miles 200 to 2000 kilometers.
What was the first university to offer a degree in meteorology in the United States?
The Massachusetts Institute of Technology was the first institute of higher education to offer a meteorology degree. Swedish meteorologist Carl Gustav Rossby, 1898 to 1957, founded the program there in 1928. Rossby would go on to found programs at the University of California at Los Angeles and the University of Chicago, as well.
Why was tornado forecasting once banned in the United States?
Concerns that warning people about possible tornado formation would panic. Residents led the Weather Bureau to ban such forecasting off and on in the 1940s. As meteorology improved and tornadoes became somewhat less terrifying in their ability to appear suddenly, the ban was lifted in 1950.
What newspaper was the first to begin publishing daily weather forecasts?
The London Times was the first newspaper to publish daily weather forecasts in 1860. The forecasts were originally written by retired Admiral Robert Fitzroy, 1805 to 1865, who at the time was head of the meteorological department at the Board of Trade. The early reports concerned temperature, air pressure, and rainfall. Beginning in 1861, storm forecasts were added.
Will there be an ice age in the future?
Yes, eventually the Earth will again cool and ice will cover land at higher latitudes and elevations. When this might happen, no one is really sure.
What is paleoclimatology?
Paleoclimatology is a fascinating discipline that combines paleontology with climate studies. Understanding what the Earth's climate was like millions of years ago can prove very valuable in understanding today's weather. In addition, it's just plain cool to find out facts such as that dinosaurs once roamed Antarctica. Tropical fruits used to grow in Oregon. And just 8,500 years ago the temperature in Greenland was about 10 degrees Fahrenheit 5 degrees Celsius warmer than it is today. Paleoclimatologists discover this information by examining animal and plant fossils, conducting ice core studies, and examining soils and rocks buried deep underground. Clues may be found in some of the most unlikely places. For instance, when ancient pine needles hoarded by rats 30,000 years ago were discovered. The composition of the plant matter was analyzed to learn what carbon dioxide levels were like back then.
What U.S. cities receive the most sunlight annually?
Yuma, Arizona, is regarded as the sunniest city in the United States, with about 4,000 hours of sunlight every year. Below are some other sunny cities for those who are averse to rainfall. Because what constitutes a sunny day is debatable, the figures are estimates of the percentage of hours of annual sunshine, or what meteorologists call the mean percentage of possible sunshine.
How fast do the strongest hurricane winds blow?
The strongest hurricanes have winds that reach speeds over 200 miles, 322 kilometers, per hour. Friction with the Earth's surface prevents winds from blowing faster than 225 miles. 362 kilometers, per hour.
What are the consequences when glaciers melt?
Glaciers that have melted in the Himalayas, home to the world's largest mountains, have filled up and burst the banks of nearby glacial lakes, filling rivers and causing widespread flooding and death to nearby populations downstream. Similar consequences will likely befall those now living near other glaciers around the world.
Who are some of the unluckiest people when it comes to being struck by lightning?
Park Ranger Roy C. Sullivan, 1912 to 1983, survived being struck by lightning 7 times between 1942 and 1977. This Virginia Ranger was hit once in a car, once in a truck, once while fishing, once while camping, once in his own front yard, once in a ranger station, and once while on top of a lookout tower. Years after his death, he still holds the dubious honor of being the human lightning rod. In another peculiar case, a Midwestern family has had numerous members struck by lightning. One woman had been struck by lightning twice in 1965 and 1995. Her grandfather was killed by a 1921 lightning bolt, while her great-uncle was also killed in the 1920s. Her nephew was temporarily blinded when he was hit. And she also had a cousin who was less seriously injured while holding an umbrella in a storm.
What is the purpose of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA?
NOAA is an agency within the U.S. Department of Commerce that is responsible for monitoring conditions on land and in the seas that have an effect on our weather, climate, and environment. NOAA is, of course, heavily involved in atmospheric research and weather forecasting. But the agency also supports the responsible management of fisheries, is concerned with marine commerce, and is involved in studies to prevent coastal erosion, among many other projects. In essence, NOAA is interested in fostering the economic and environmental health of the country, as well as the safety of its citizens, through scientific management of oceanic, coastal, and mainland resources.
What is the greenhouse effect?
The greenhouse effect is a natural process of the atmosphere that traps some of the sun's heat near the Earth. The problem with the greenhouse effect, however, is that it has been unnaturally increased, causing more heat to be trapped and the temperature on the planet to rise. The gases that have caused the greenhouse effect were added to the atmosphere as a byproduct of human activities, such as combustion from automobiles.
What is the mesosphere?
The mesosphere is the uppermost layer of the stratosphere. Below the mesosphere, at altitudes of 25 to 40 miles, 40 to 65 kilometers. Is a warm layer of the stratosphere that contains a high concentration of ozone molecules that block ultraviolet light.
How hot can it get on the Earth's surface?
Temperature records used by meteorologists and reported in weather broadcasts refer to air temperature. The surface of the Earth, however, can get much hotter than the record 120s and 130s degree F. High 40s to high 50s degrees C, that are usually considered the extreme. Soil temperatures can actually rise about 180 degrees Fahrenheit 82 degrees Celsius. And the surface temperature in Death Valley has been measured at a hellish 200 degrees Fahrenheit 93 degrees Celsius.
What replaced the WSR-57S?
WSR-74s were added to the radar grid in 1974 and were used in conjunction with the older 57s, as they were called. It was not until 1988, however, that the next generation radar, NEXRAD, also called WSR-88D, were built using the newer Doppler technology. The first NEXRAD was deployed in Norman, Oklahoma, in 1990. There are now 160 NEXRAD radar stations throughout the United States.
Does Alaska get hotter than Hawaii?
Strangely enough, the two states are currently tied. Hawaii, though located in the tropics, enjoys very moderate temperatures due to favorable winds and the island's topography. The mountainous parts of this 50th state can actually get very cold. And the tops of Mauna Kea and Mauna Loa receive snowfall regularly. While the average temperatures across the state of Hawaii are higher than in Alaska. The islands have fewer extremes. Alaska's interior region can get very warm indeed, sometimes reaching 90 degrees Fahrenheit 32 degrees Celsius. The highest temperature in Alaska thus far recorded is 100 degrees Fahrenheit 37.8 degrees Celsius, which was measured at Ft. Yukon on June 27, 1915. On April 27, 1931, Pahala, Hawaii reached the same extreme.
Has there ever been a hurricane in Great Britain?
Well, what really occurred in Great Britain was a very intense low-pressure system with hurricane-force winds. On January 25, 1990, a storm with winds up to 120 miles, 193 kilometers per hour hit Great Britain, killing 45 people and causing over $1 billion in damage. Even so, Brits often remember the Great Storm of 1987 even less fondly. Though it cannot be classified as a hurricane, hurricanes are tropical events only. It killed 18 people and was, at that time, the worst storm to hit the British Isles in the last 3 centuries.
Is global warming causing deserts to expand?
Desertification. The expansion of deserts and corresponding decrease in fresh water supplies is the result of several factors, including agricultural misuse, overpopulation, drought, and also climate change. There is no question whatsoever that the world's deserts are increasing in acreage at an alarming rate and that freshwater lakes and other water supplies are shrinking and turning to dust. Many examples may be cited, but here are just a few. Lake Chad, which has water shared by the African nations of Nigeria, Niger, Cameroon, and Chad, is 95% smaller than it was in the 1960s. Kazakhstan has lost half of its productive farmland since 1980. Sandstorms in Iran have engulfed more than 100 villages since 2002. The Gobi Desert in China is growing quickly, destroying land and causing giant dust storms that cost the country $6.5 billion every year. It is estimated that, by 2025, 3/4 of Africa will face starvation because of the loss of water and farmland. Population migration and fights over resources are leading to wars, especially in Africa, such as the current conflict in Sudan.
How is Mie scattering different from Rayleigh scattering?
Mie scattering deals with energy waves by particles larger than the wavelengths of light, while Rayleigh scattering, named after English physicist John William Strutt, 3rd Baron Rayleigh 1842–1919, deals with how light is scattered by particles smaller than electromagnetic wavelengths. Mie scattering can explain things like the reddish color of clouds during a sunset, scattering at the level of dust and water particles, while Rayleigh scattering explains why the sky is blue, scattering at the molecular level.
What is a bishop's ring?
A bishop's ring is a ring usually with a reddish outer edge that is seen around the sun. It is probably due to dust particles in the air, since it is seen after all significant volcanic eruptions.
What is an acre-foot?
One acre-foot is equal to 43,560 gallons, 164,875 liters, of water, which is what it would take to bury an acre of land in a foot of water. The term is usually used to measure rainfall runoff, reservoir capacity, and irrigation.
What is a slough?
A slough is a layer of loose snow. On rare occasions, an avalanche may be comprised of slough rolling down a hill. But more frequently it is a dry or wet slab that causes an avalanche.
Where are the neutrinos coming from?
The vast majority of neutrinos striking our planet come from the Sun. The nuclear reactions at the core of the Sun create huge numbers of neutrinos. And unlike the light that is produced, which takes thousands of years to flow their way out of the Sun's interior, the neutrinos come out of the Sun in less than 3 seconds, reaching Earth in just 8 minutes.
How do ocean currents affect weather?
The world's oceans cover about 70% of our planet's surface. Thus, ocean water also absorbs more heat from the sun than the land does. In addition to this, water absorbs and emits heat energy more slowly than land does. Warm water, therefore, remains warm longer, and cold water remains cold longer. As the world's ocean waters circulate through the action of currents, this warm or cold water can be transported long distances before it changes temperature. This is an important way that Earth distributes its heat energy. Warm waters in the tropical Atlantic Ocean are carried north as far as England and Scandinavia. For instance, while warm waters in the Indian Ocean circulate down toward Australia and South Africa. Land barriers, such as that formed by Central America, are vital for diverting currents in various directions. It's because of this that currents from Western Africa move toward the Caribbean, and are then deflected north. Without Central America, Great Britain would be as frigidly cold as the remote wastes of northern Siberia.
What are some natural sources of air pollution?
Natural sources of pollution may include dust, methane from human and animal waste or flatus, radon gas, smoke from wildfires, and volcanic activity.
What are coronas and anticoronas?
A corona is a glowing white ring edged with blue on the inner side and red on the outer, and seen around the moon, or less often, around the sun, usually during eclipses. It is caused by light being diffracted by water droplets in a thin cloud, such as an altostratus cloud. The smaller the droplets of water in the air, the larger the corona will appear. An anticorona, sometimes called a glory or Brockenbau, is one or more concentric rings that appear when an object, such as an airplane, casts a shadow on a thin layer of clouds. The anticorona will appear on the side opposite of where the light source, sun or moon, is.
What was the Great Flood of 1993?
Heavy rainfall caused river flooding in 1993 that was so severe in Iowa that, when observed by NOAA sensors, the state looked like a sixth Great Lake. The Mississippi River was 7 miles wide at some points, and the Missouri River also spilled over its banks, causing nearly $20 billion in property losses, 48 deaths, and the evacuation of 85,000 people.
What is a meteorologist?
People usually associate meteorologists with television station weathercasters. Most meteorologists, though, work behind the scenes. They can be found working for the National Weather Service, in laboratories, at weather research stations, or working for universities. Meteorologists need a good understanding of physics, chemistry, hydrology, and other disciplines to do their jobs well. The American Meteorological Society defines a meteorologist as someone who can research, observe, explain, and forecast the weather, who understands the principles behind weather phenomena, and who appreciates the effects that the weather has on Earth. Meteorologists obtain a bachelor's degree in science to do their jobs, and many of them have master's degrees or doctorates. There are also a variety of specialties in the field, such as hydrology and climatology. And many meteorologists study mathematics, computer engineering, electrical engineering, and more.
What is a meteor shower?
Meteors are often called shooting stars because they are bright for a moment and move quickly across the sky. Usually, a shooting star appears in the sky about once an hour or so. Sometimes, though, a large number of meteors appear in the sky over the course of several nights. These meteors will appear to come from the same part of the sky, and dozens or hundreds, sometimes even thousands, of meteors can be seen every hour. We call such dazzling displays meteor showers. The strongest meteor showers are sometimes called meteor storms.
What is a contrail?
The word contrail is short for condensation trail, and it refers to the water vapor that condenses around the exhaust of a jet aircraft flying at a high altitude. First studied during World War II, when there was a concern that contrails would give away the positions of B-29 aircraft. Contrails are now of interest to climatologists who worry about their effects on global warming. For instance, studies have shown that where contrails are present, there is an increase in the formation of more cirrus clouds. Scientists are also concerned about the other chemicals in jet exhaust that could adversely affect chemical processes within the troposphere and lower atmosphere.
What is the solar spectrum?
The solar spectrum is what results when the sun's light is broken up by raindrops, ice crystals, or other prisms into its component wavelengths. The shorter wavelengths are in the blue, indigo, and violet spectrum, while the longer wavelengths appear as red, yellow, and orange colors to the human eye.
Have the Great Lakes ever been completely frozen over?
There have been occasions when the Great Lakes completely froze, which last happened in 1979. In the winter of 1993 to 1994, the lakes almost froze solid, but not completely. Even though this does not happen often, the Great Lakes generally shut down to shipping. Traffic during the months of January through March because the ice is far too hazardous.
Why have cyclones striking out of the Indian Ocean proven to be so deadly?
Cyclones that have struck India, Bangladesh, Myanmar, and other areas in Southeast Asia are no stronger than the powerful hurricanes that have caused so much death and damage in the Gulf Coast. Many more people have died as a result of these cyclones. However, because of high population densities near the coasts and because so many of these people live in poverty and survive in rickety shacks and other substandard shelters. The 2008 cyclone that hit Myanmar was particularly brutal in the area of the Irrawaddy Delta, a low-lying peninsula that had been converted to rice and shrimp farms. These farms replaced mangrove forests that would have served as natural buffers between the land and the oncoming cyclone.
How much energy can a hurricane produce?
An average hurricane can strike with a force equivalent to about 400 hydrogen bombs, each packing 20 megatons of explosive power.
Are there other types of tornado like whirlwinds?
Certainly. Smoke from forest fires and ash and steam from volcanoes can often stir about in vortices that look like weak tornadoes.
What is anemophobia?
A fear of the wind and sometimes even mere drafts is known as anemophobia.
What happens to the Sun every 22 years?
The sunspot activity on the Sun is related to the magnetic field change the Sun goes through. Every 22 years, the Sun's magnetic field completely reverses. Magnetic north becomes magnetic south and vice versa. Other than having something to do with sunspot activity, astronomers do not believe that this flipping affects our weather in any way.
What is a diurnal temperature range?
As one might guess from the term, diurnal temperature range means the variation between the lowest and highest temperatures during a given day at a certain location. This can vary widely, depending on the season and place. For example, the climate on the Front Range of the Rocky Mountains in North America has been known to change by as much as 100 degrees within a 24-hour period, while in the tropics temperatures tend to remain more stable, changing by, perhaps, 10 degrees or so within a specific day.
Is the best time to see an aurora during the winter?
Seasons don't have anything to do with whether or not aurorae will occur over the polar regions. Rather, they are related to solar storms. However, it may be more likely that you will see aurorae during the winter because the nights are longer.
What is acid rain?
Motor vehicles and industrial activity release tons of pollutants into the air. When mixed together, the pollutants form sulfuric and nitric acids that later fall to the ground in rain or snow. This precipitation is known as acid rain. Acid rain is responsible for damaging lakes by killing plant and animal life and for killing trees around the world. Canada has been especially hard hit by acid rain caused by industrial activities in the United States.
What happened because of a dust storm in 1977?
One of the worst dust storms to hit the United States since the Dust Bowl occurred in February 1977, when fierce winds blew over plowed fields from Colorado to Texas, kicking up a huge dust cloud. The dust storm dumped 3 million tons, 2.7 metric tons, of soil onto the state of Oklahoma. The cloud continued through Mississippi and Alabama, dramatically raising particulate pollution, and continued across the country and far into the Atlantic Ocean.
What is sulfur dioxide?
Burning coal is a primary source of sulfur dioxide, SO2, in the atmosphere. And so it was one of the first causes of air pollution, arising during the industrial age. Sulfur in bituminous and other forms of coal, when burned, bonds with oxygen to form this pollutant, which irritates eyes and the respiratory system. It is also a source of acid rain. Technologies have been developed that scrub sulfur dioxide emissions from smokestacks, and have done much to improve air quality. While the United States has dramatically lowered these emissions, other developing nations, such as China and India, do not impose vigorous restrictions on sulfur dioxide from factories and power plants.
What should you do if you are stranded in your car during a blizzard?
If you are far from any buildings or people who might help, rather than getting out of your car and wandering off, possibly getting lost or freezing to death, it is always a better idea to remain in your vehicle. Hopefully, you will have a charged cell phone handy, but if not, it is still better to remain in the car. After checking to make sure that the car's exhaust pipe is not blocked by any snow or ice. Being wary of carbon monoxide poisoning, keep the car running for as long as possible to stay warm. Also, turn on your hazard lights, which may attract help, such as a police officer, while also warning snow plows not to come too close. During the winter months, it is a good idea to keep blankets, food, a spare tire, and a first aid kit in your car. Never drink alcohol to try and stay warm, but a thermos containing a hot beverage or soup would prove handy.
How does air flow around low and high pressure systems?
Air tends to flow toward a low pressure system and away from a high pressure system. In the northern hemisphere, the air will spiral in a counterclockwise direction as it moves toward a low pressure center, and it will move in a clockwise direction as it shifts away from a high pressure center.
What are TSBs?
Total suspended particulates, TSPs, are particles in the air ranging in size from 10 microns on down to less than a micron in diameter. A micron is 1/millionth of a meter. People can breathe in many TSPs, though larger particles can be weeded out by such things as nose hairs and mucous membranes. TSPs either result from primary sources, e.g., car exhaust, smokestacks, or are formed from secondary sources, such as ammonia and sulfur dioxide combining to form new pollutants, in this case, ammonium sulfate.
What are some of the erratic behaviors of tornadoes?
Tornadoes are famous for their ability to destroy one home or other building while leaving the structures next door completely intact. Such random acts of destruction occur either when there is one very slim tornado or there is a multiple vortex tornado or a tornado with several satellite tornadoes surrounding it. A rope tornado, for instance, can clear a path on the ground that is only a matter of several yards wide. On the other hand, the subvortices, or suction vortices, of a multiple vortex tornado can have widely varying speeds and widths. Sometimes, too, a tornado might not quite reach the ground, but it might be low enough to rip off the roofs of multi-story structures while leaving ranch homes and strip malls unharmed. Tornadoes can exhibit other erratic behaviors, too, weakening and strengthening as they travel, or circling back on themselves to hit the same location twice. The strength of the buildings, too, matters a great deal. As the developers of the enhanced Fujita scale recognized.
What causes avalanches?
The most dangerous conditions for an avalanche occur when a lot of snow has fallen and or blowing wind has caused snow to accumulate within a short period of time, hours or a few days, versus weeks. A dry slab avalanche is the most hazardous. This is when a heavy slab of snow that has formed quickly is resting above another layer of snow that is weaker but formed over a longer period of time. Dry slab avalanches are usually set off by a person walking over the unstable layer. There are also wet slab avalanches, which, as one might guess, involve a layer of wet snow over a harder layer of snow. Avalanches are most likely to occur on hills with inclines of 30 to 45 degrees. Though wet snow can tumble down a hill with a grade of as little as 10 degrees. And dry snow regularly causes avalanches on hills with about 20 to 22 degree slopes. Avalanches happen abruptly, and once a slab has broken off, there is usually no escape for someone downhill. Traveling at 60 to 80 miles, 95 to 130 kilometers per hour, an avalanche will quickly bury everything in its path.
Is carbon dioxide the most harmful global warming gas?
No. Actually, water vapor contributes much more to global warming than CO2 or methane do. The problem is that human activities often increase particulates in the air, which provides nuclei for precipitation to form in clouds.
What is the evidence supporting global warming?
More and more scientists are becoming convinced that we are seeing an increasingly swift transition toward a warmer climate on Earth. Data is constantly being collected by meteorologists, environmentalists, and other scientists working in labs and out in the field. While there is no definitive proof that will assuage all doubters, the evidence is mounting. Below are some of the reasons why the fear of global warming is gaining ground. Record-breaking temperatures. Cities around the world have been recording high temperatures in the last decade or two that have exceeded all previous records. Drought and rain pattern changes. Dry areas are becoming drier, and wet areas are becoming wetter. Floods are becoming more frequent, as rivers fill with record levels of water. For example, the American Midwest and Great Plains states have seen significant increases in flooding in recent years. Though part of this can be blamed on farming and levee activities. The Northwest is also seeing much more rain, while the Southwest and especially southeastern states have been experiencing extended droughts. More extreme weather. Some, though certainly not all, scientists feel that hurricane and tornado activity appears to be on the rise, with the United States and Southeast Asia being particularly hard hit. One of the worst years of recent memory, 2005, included the devastating Hurricane Katrina that destroyed New Orleans and other Gulf Coast cities. Climatologists noted that there had been a lull in hurricanes during the 1970s and 1980s. But since 1995 there has been a significant upswing. Between 1995 and 2005, 9 of the hurricane seasons had above normal incidence of storms. Warming oceans, coral reef bleaching. There is widespread and undisputed evidence that coral reefs around the globe are in trouble. Although coral reefs occur in tropical, warm waters, too much warming will kill coral. First, because the organisms simply don't tolerate such temperatures. And second, because warmer water is not able to maintain as much dissolved calcium, which coral need to survive. When corals die, the vivid colors the tiny animals lend reefs disappear, hence the term bleaching. Melting glaciers. The most commonly used piece of evidence for global warming has been the changes seen in glaciers, especially in the north, but also in Antarctica and on mountaintops around the world. Photographs have shown, for example, that Greenland glaciers are retreating at a rate of about 100 feet, 30 meters, per day. In Antarctica, the Larsen ice shelf, covering an area roughly the size of Rhode Island, broke off the mainland. Meanwhile, the glacier on top of Mount Kilimanjaro in Tanzania is quickly melting. And scientists speculate there will be no more snow on the mountain by 2020.
What is diamond dust?
Diamond dust, also known as ice prisms, are tiny ice crystals that can form in the air on extremely cold days if the air contains enough moisture. The effect can be quite beautiful, as sparkling, barely visible crystals appear in mid-air on sunny days, catching the sunlight and, indeed, appearing as if they are tiny diamond chips wafting in the breeze.
What has recent sunspot activity been doing?
Sunspot activity during the dawning years of the 21st century has been a roller coaster ride. In 2004, it was reported that there were more sunspots on the Sun than the Earth had seen in some 8,000 years. The next year, however, there was an abrupt drop-off in sunspot activity, a trend that has continued through 2008 and into 2009. In fact, during the last months of 2008, there were almost no sunspots at all.
What is humidity?
Humidity refers to the amount or saturation of water vapor in the air, depending on air temperature and pressure. The air can contain differing amounts of humidity before the vapor turns into actual precipitation.
What is the Clean Air Act?
In New York City in 1966, air pollution became so awful that hundreds of deaths were attributed to it that year. This and other serious pollution problems in America led to the 1970 Clean Air Act, which was later amended in 1977 and again in 1990. The Clean Air Act was designed to improve the air quality for all Americans. It was preceded by the Air Quality Act of 1967, which failed to do the job because it did not require environmental standards to be set. The Clean Air Act, however, charges the Environmental Protection Agency with setting standards regarding emissions of air pollutants, ranging from ozone and benzene to carbon monoxide and particulate matter, from factories, power plants, and all modes of transportation.
What is lake effect snow?
Water evaporating off lakes can increase air humidity and encourage cloud formation and precipitation in areas near shorelines. As cold air moves over a water body such as a lake, it picks up moisture, then, when the clouds reach the shoreline, the air moves upwards in what is called the orographic effect. This, in turn, creates concentrated bands of precipitation that then release precipitation within relatively short distances of shorelines. Some record snowfalls have been documented as a result of the lake effect. For example, on January 17, 1959, 51 inches, 129.5 centimeters of snow fell on Bennett's Bridge, New York, over a 16-hour period. Buffalo, New York, is infamous for being buried in snow because of its proximity to Lake Erie. The winter of 1976 to 1977, for instance, saw the city experience 30-foot snow drifts. Storms with 70-mile, 113 km per hour winds and bitter temperatures led to the deaths of 29 people that season.
Which continents have the highest and lowest average elevations on the planet?
Antarctica has the highest average elevation, 7,546 feet 2,300 meters above sea level. Much of which is due to the permanent glacial ice. Australia has the lowest average, 984 feet 300 meters above sea level.
What are the four major cloud groups and their types?
Clouds are categorized in the following manner. 1. High clouds are composed almost entirely of ice crystals. The bases of these clouds start at 16,500 feet, 5,000 meters, and reach up to 45,000 feet, 13,650 meters. A. Cirrus clouds, from the Latin for lock of hair, are thin, feathery crystal clouds that appear in patches or narrow bands. B. Cirrostratus clouds are thin, white clouds that resemble veils or sheets. These clouds can be striated or fibrous in appearance. Because of the ice content, they are associated with the halos that surround the sun or moon. C. Cirrocumulus clouds are thin clouds that appear as small white flakes or cottony patches. They may contain supercooled water. 2. Middle clouds are composed primarily of water. The height of the cloud bases range from 6,500 to 23,000 feet, 2,000 to 7,000 meters. A. Altostratus clouds appear as bluish or grayish veils or layers of clouds that can gradually merge into altocumulus clouds. The sun may be dimly visible through them, but flat, thick sheets of these clouds can obscure the Sunday B. Altocumulus clouds are white or gray and occur in layers or patches of solid clouds with rounded shapes. 3. Low clouds are composed almost entirely of water and may at times be supercooled. At subfreezing temperatures, snow and ice crystals may be present as well. The bases of these clouds start near Earth's surface and climb to 6,500 feet, 2,000 meters. In the middle latitudes, A. Stratus clouds are gray, uniform, sheet-like clouds with a relatively low base, but they can also be patchy, shapeless, low gray clouds. Sometimes thin enough for the sun to shine through, these clouds bring drizzle and snow. B. Stratocumulus clouds are globular, rounded masses that form at the top of the layer. C. Nimbostratus clouds are gray or dark, relatively shapeless, massive clouds that contain rain, snow, and ice pellets. 4. Clouds with vertical development contain supercooled water above the freezing level and grow to great heights. The cloud bases range from 1,000 feet, 300 meters, to 10,000 feet, 3,300 meters. A. Cumulus clouds are detached, fair weather clouds with relatively flat bases and dome-shaped tops. These usually do not have extensive vertical development and do not produce precipitation. B. Cumulonimbus clouds are unstable, large, vertical clouds with dense boiling tops that bring showers, hail, thunder, and lightning.
What is the National Weather Service, NWS?
Part of NOAA, the NWS was founded in 1870 as the National Weather Bureau. It was renamed the U.S. Weather Bureau in 1891, and became the National Weather Service in 1967. It focuses on providing the citizens of the United States with warnings about possibly dangerous storms and other weather events. The NWS has forecasting centers in 122 locations around the country, including U.S. territories like Guam, American Samoa, and Puerto Rico.
How warm can the weather be and yet have snowfall?
It is possible for the temperature on the ground to be in the 40s Fahrenheit, 4 to 9 degrees Celsius, and still snow. This happens when snow forms at colder temperatures in clouds and does not melt before reaching the ground. In one case, a temperature of 47 degrees Fahrenheit 8 degrees Celsius was measured at New York City's LaGuardia Airport when snow was also seen.